The world ended on a Tuesday, not with a cataclysmic explosion, but with a whisper, a sequence of coded transmissions that activated hidden technology buried deep beneath Earth's crust. Cities crumbled as gravity fields warped, oceans lifted into the sky, and humanity's history was rewritten in a matter of hours. The Zerreen, an alien species with a mastery of temporal manipulation, didn't come to conquer. They came to erase. Dr. Elena Vargas stood in the remnants of her lab, surrounded by shattered glass and the flickering remnants of her life's work. Her hands trembled as she clutched a small, glowing device, a prototype she hadn't dared to test before today. It was humanity's last chance. Above her, the sky shimmered with cracks of light as the Zerreen's temporal machines twisted reality. Events unspooled and rewound in chaotic loops, creating fractures in time that swallowed entire buildings and people. Elena's comm device crackled to life. "Doctor, we need that device operational now," came the voice of Captain Ria Solis, leader of the resistance. Her tone was sharp, but beneath it was a layer of desperation. "If we don't stop this temporal cascade, there won't be anything left to save." "I know," Elena snapped, her voice tight with panic. Her fingers flew across the device's interface, calibrating its parameters with the precision of someone who had spent her entire life preparing for a moment she had never believed would come. "The temporal displacement field isn't stable. If I activate it now, I don't know where or when it will send me." "That's a risk we have to take," Ria replied. "You're the only one who can do this. The Zerreen have centralized their control at the nexus point. If you can get there and disrupt their timeline." "I know the plan," Elena interrupted, her voice softening. "I just hope it's enough." The temporal displacement device, TDD for short, hummed in her hands, its core glowing brighter as it began to synchronize with the surrounding temporal anomalies. Elena closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. She thought of her parents, lost in the initial attack. She thought of her colleagues, her friends, and the countless lives that had been erased in an instant. She thought of Ria, who had risked everything to protect what remained of humanity. And she thought of the Zerreen, their cold, insect-like eyes devoid of mercy as they declared their intention to correct Earth's timeline. "Here goes nothing," Elena whispered. She activated the device. The world around her dissolved into a blinding swirl of light and sound. Time fractured, its fragments spinning around her like shards of glass. Elena felt herself being pulled in every direction at once. Her body stretched and compressed in ways that defied comprehension. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Elena staggered, her boots crunching against unfamiliar ground. The air was crisp and cold, the sky above her an unbroken expanse of stars. She looked around, disoriented, and realized she was standing in the middle of a Zerreen temporal facility. The nexus point. The facility was a labyrinth of sleek, metallic corridors and glowing conduits that pulsed with an eerie blue light. Alien figures moved through the halls, their movements precise and mechanical. Elena ducked behind a console, her heart pounding as she tried to get her bearings. The TDD vibrated in her hand, displaying a holographic map of the facility. It highlighted a central chamber, the temporal core. If she could reach it and overload its systems, she could disrupt the Zerreen's control over time and give humanity a fighting chance. Elena clenched her jaw, steeling herself. She wasn't a soldier, but she had come prepared. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small device, a temporal scrambler designed to disrupt Zerreen sensors. Activating it, she slipped into the shadows and began making her way toward the core. The corridors were eerily quiet, the hum of the temporal machinery the only sound. Elena moved quickly but carefully, her eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The Zerreen were meticulous in their designs, and she knew they wouldn't leave such a critical facility unguarded. As she rounded a corner, she came face to face with one of them. The Zerreen towered over her, its insectoid frame glinting in the artificial light. Its multifaceted eyes locked onto her, and it let out a clicking sound that sent a chill down her spine. Elena didn't hesitate. She activated the scrambler, and the Zerreen staggered, its movements jerky and disoriented. Seizing the opportunity, she slipped past it and continued toward the core. Her heart raced as she approached the central chamber. The temporal core was a massive, spherical structure that pulsed with energy, its surface covered in intricate alien symbols. Dozens of Zerreen technicians worked around it, their focus entirely on maintaining the system. Elena took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had one chance to do this. If she failed, there would be no one left to try again. She activated the TDD, its glow intensifying as it synchronized with the core. The Zerreen immediately noticed her presence, their clicking voices rising in alarm. Elena ignored them, her fingers flying across the device's interface as she initiated the overload sequence. The core began to vibrate, its energy output spiking dangerously. The Zerreen advanced on her, their weapons raised, but she stood her ground, her eyes fixed on the device. "Just a few more seconds," she muttered. The core's energy reached a critical threshold, and Elena slammed her hand down on the TDD, triggering the final sequence. A blinding wave of light engulfed the chamber, and Elena felt herself being pulled into the maelstrom once again. Time fractured around her, but this time, she felt a sense of purpose, a certainty that she was rewriting the story of humanity. As the light consumed her, she held onto that thought, her determination unshaken. And then, there was nothing. Elena woke to the sound of crashing waves. She opened her eyes, blinking against the sunlight, and realized she was lying on a beach. The air was warm, the sand coarse beneath her fingers. For a moment, she thought she had failed, that she had been cast into some forgotten corner of time, cut off from everything she had fought for. But then she saw the ruins. Jutting out from the shoreline were the skeletal remains of a city, its buildings twisted and broken, as if they had been wrenched apart by some unimaginable force. The Zarene's handiwork. Elena pushed herself to her feet, the TDD still clutched in her hand, its glow faint but steady. She checked its interface, scanning for any signs of where or when she was. The readings were erratic, but one thing was clear. She had landed decades in the past, before the Zarene invasion. If she could find humanity's leaders, she could warn them, help them prepare for what was coming. But first, she needed to survive. The ruins were eerily quiet as Elena made her way through them, the sound of her footsteps swallowed by the oppressive stillness. The city had been abandoned for years, its streets overgrown with weeds and its buildings crumbling into decay. But there were signs of life, makeshift shelters, scattered belongings, and faint trails in the dirt that suggested recent movement. Elena followed the trails, her senses on high alert. She didn't know what she would find, but she couldn't afford to be caught off guard. As she rounded a corner, she saw a group of figures huddled around a fire in the remains of an old courtyard. They were human, their clothes tattered and their faces gaunt with hunger and exhaustion. "Who's there?" one of them called, their voice sharp with suspicion. Elena stepped into the light, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "My name is Elena," she said. "I'm not here to hurt you. I need your help." The group exchanged wary glances, their postures tense. One of them, a tall man with a scar running down the side of his face, stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. "You don't look like you're from around here," he said. "What do you want?" Elena hesitated, weighing her words carefully. "I'm from the future," she said. "I know how that sounds, but it's the truth. The Zarene are coming, aliens who will destroy everything if we don't stop them. I have a way to fight back, but I can't do it alone." The man raised an eyebrow, his skepticism clear. "And we're just supposed to take your word for it?" Elena held up the TDD, its glow catching the firelight. "This is proof," she said. "It's a temporal displacement device. It brought me here to your time so I could warn you. If we work together, we can stop them before it's too late." The group murmured among themselves, their expressions a mix of curiosity and doubt. Finally, the man nodded. "All right," he said. "I don't know if I believe you, but if you're telling the truth, we don't have much to lose. My name's Jonas. Welcome to what's left of humanity." Elena spent the next few days integrating herself with the group. They were survivors of a conflict she hadn't studied in detail, a civil war that had fractured the world long before the Zarene arrived. Their trust was hard-won, but she proved herself through her actions, sharing knowledge and technology that improved their chances of survival. As she gained their trust, Elena began to share more about the future. She told them about the Zarene, about their temporal weapons and their plan to rewrite Earth's history. She explained the stakes in terms they could understand, framing the fight not as an abstract threat, but as a battle for the survival of their children and their children's children. Jonas became her closest ally, his skepticism giving way to a grudging respect. Together, they began to build a resistance, recruiting others who shared their vision of a united humanity. They scavenged old technology, repurposing it into weapons and tools. They trained, their numbers growing as word spread of their cause. But the Zarene were not idle. One night, as the resistance gathered in a hidden bunker, the TDD emitted a warning signal. Elena's heart sank as she read the data. The Zarene had detected her temporal disruption and sent agents to eliminate her. "They're coming," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "We have to move. Now." The resistance scrambled to evacuate, their movements quick and efficient. Elena led them through the ruins, her knowledge of the future guiding them to safety. But the Zarene were relentless, their agents moving with an otherworldly precision that made them nearly impossible to evade. The final confrontation came in the heart of the ruined city, where Elena and the resistance made their stand. The battle was brutal, the air filled with the sound of gunfire and alien weapons. Elena fought with everything she had, her determination fueling her every move. In the chaos, she activated the TDD, using its temporal energy to disrupt the Zarene's coordination. destruction. The resistance seized the opportunity, turning the tide of the battle and driving the aliens back. As the dust settled, Jonas approached Elena, his expression a mix of exhaustion and admiration. "We did it," he said. "But this isn't over, is it?" Elena shook her head. "No," she said. "This was just the beginning. The Zerine won't stop until they've erased us. But we've shown them that we're not defenseless. We've shown them that humanity fights back." Jonas placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm. "Then let's keep fighting," he said. Together, Elena nodded, a spark of hope igniting in her chest. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time, she felt that victory was within reach. Because humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its knowledge, it was its ability to unite in the face of impossible odds. In the weeks following their first victory against the Zerine, the resistance transformed from a ragtag group of survivors into a disciplined and determined force. Jonas took on the role of commander, his natural leadership rallying the fighters under a common cause. Elena became the strategist, her knowledge of the future guiding their decisions as they prepared for the battles to come. The ruins of the city became their base of operations, its labyrinthine tunnels and crumbling buildings offering protection from the Zerine's aerial patrols. The resistance worked tirelessly to fortify their position, creating hidden defenses and setting traps that would catch the Zerine off guard. Elena spent her nights in the bunker, poring over schematics and data collected from the TDD. The device had become an invaluable tool, not just for navigating time, but for predicting the Zerine's movements. Its readings revealed patterns in their temporal disruptions, allowing the resistance to anticipate their attacks and strike back with precision. But the TDD also carried a grim reminder of the stakes. Its holographic interface displayed a fading timeline, a visualization of Earth's history being slowly overwritten by the Zerine. Every victory bought them time, but the war was far from over. One evening, as Elena worked late into the night, Jonas entered the bunker, his expression grim. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice low. Elena looked up from the TDD, her brow furrowing. "What is it?" "Scouts spotted a Zerine convoy moving through the western sector," Jonas said. "They're transporting something bigger than anything we've seen before. We think it's a temporal stabilizer." Elena's heart sank. The stabilizer was a critical piece of Zerine technology, capable of anchoring their timeline and making their changes to history permanent. If the resistance didn't stop it, their efforts would be for nothing. "We have to intercept it," she said, her voice firm. "If they deploy that stabilizer, we'll lose everything." Jonas nodded, his jaw tightening. "I'll rally the team, but we'll need a plan." The resistance mobilized quickly, their preparations marked by a sense of urgency. Elena and Jonas worked together to devise a strategy, using the TDD to map out the convoy's route and identify potential ambush points. The plan was risky, but it was their only chance to stop the stabilizer. The attack took place under the cover of darkness. The resistance fighters moved like shadows through the ruins, their weapons primed and their nerves steeled. Elena watched from a vantage point, her heart pounding as the convoy came into view. The Zerine convoy was a formidable sight, its vehicles bristling with alien weaponry and surrounded by heavily armed guards. At the center was the stabilizer, its spherical core glowing with a pulsating blue light. "Hold your positions," Jonas said over the comm. "Wait for my signal." The resistance fighters held their breath as the convoy drew closer. When it reached the ambush point, Jonas gave the signal and chaos erupted. Explosions lit up the night as the resistance launched their attack, their weapons striking with precision. The Zerine guards responded quickly, their energy weapons lighting up the darkness. The battle was fierce, the air filled with the sounds of gunfire and shouts. Elena stayed focused, her eyes locked on the stabilizer. She knew that disabling it was the key to their victory. As the battle raged around her, she activated the TDD, using its temporal energy to disrupt the stabilizer's defenses. The device pulsed in her hands, its glow intensifying as it synchronized with the stabilizer. The Zerine immediately noticed the disruption, their guards converging on her position. But the resistance fighters held them back, their determination turning the tide of the battle. With a final surge of energy, the TDD overloaded the stabilizer, its core erupting in a brilliant flash of light. The shockwave knocked Elena off her feet, and she scrambled to her knees as the stabilizer collapsed in on itself, its energy dissipating into the night. The Zerine guards faltered, their coordination disrupted by the loss of the stabilizer. The resistance seized the opportunity, driving the remaining forces into retreat. When the dust settled, the ruins were quiet once more. Jonas approached Elena, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," he said, "but they'll be back." Elena nodded, her gaze distant. "They will," she said, "but we've shown them that we're not afraid, that we're not going to stand by and let them erase us." The victory was a turning point for the resistance. resistance. News of their success spread to other survivor groups, inspiring a wave of defiance across the remnants of humanity. The resistance grew stronger, their numbers bolstered by those who had once believed the fight was hopeless. But Elena knew that the war was far from over. The Zerreen were adaptive and relentless, and each victory came with a cost. As the resistance prepared for their next move, she resolved to keep fighting no matter the odds, because humanity's survival depended on it. In the months that followed the destruction of the stabilizer, the resistance launched a series of coordinated strikes against the Zerreen. These victories, while hard-fought, began to shift the balance of power. For the first time, humanity was not merely surviving, they were fighting back on a scale that even the Zerreen couldn't ignore. Elena, however, felt the weight of their progress. Every battle brought casualties, every victory etched more names into her memory. The resistance had become a symbol of hope, but the cost of that hope was written in blood. The TDD remained at the heart of their operations. Its ability to predict the Zerreen's movements and disrupt their temporal technology had given the resistance an edge. But the device was beginning to show signs of strain. Its core, once a steady glow, flickered with increasing instability. "How long do we have?" Jonas asked one evening as they studied the TDD's latest readings. Elena shook her head, her expression grim. "Not long," she admitted. "The core is degrading. If it fails, we'll lose our ability to counter the Zerreen's temporal manipulations." Jonas leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowing. "Can we repair it?" "Not without materials we don't have," Elena said. "But there's another option." She hesitated, the weight of her next words pressing down on her. "The Zerreen have a facility, a temporal nexus. It's where they control their timeline manipulations. If we can infiltrate it and destroy the core, we can disrupt their entire operation." Jonas frowned. "That sounds like a suicide mission." "It might be," Elena admitted, "but it's our best shot. If we don't take the fight to them, they'll keep coming until there's nothing left." The decision to target the temporal nexus was not made lightly. The resistance spent weeks planning the assault, gathering intelligence, and preparing their forces. The mission would require every resource, every ounce of courage they had. But as the plans took shape, a sense of determination settled over the resistance. They would not go quietly into the void. The assault began under the cover of a solar storm, its interference masking their approach. The resistance fleet, cobbled together from scavenged ships and alien technology, moved through the void with a precision born of necessity. Elena led the ground team, her presence a steadying force amid the chaos. The temporal nexus loomed before them, its structure a monolithic testament to the Zerreen's power. It pulsed with energy, its conduits glowing with an unnatural light. The resistance breached the nexus's defenses, their attack swift and coordinated. The Zerreen responded with overwhelming force, their precision and technology pushing the resistance to their limits. But humanity fought with a desperation that the Zerreen had not anticipated. Inside the nexus, Elena and her team navigated a labyrinth of corridors and alien machinery. The TDD guided them, its flickering glow leading them toward the core. Every step was a battle, every moment a test of their resolve. When they reached the core chamber, the sight took Elena's breath away. The temporal core was a massive, crystalline structure that pulsed with a kaleidoscope of light. It was beautiful and terrifying, a physical embodiment of the Zerreen's control over time. Elena activated the TDD, its energy synchronizing with the core. The Zerreen immediately detected the disruption, their guards converging on the chamber. The resistance fighters held them off, their determination unshaken despite the odds. The core began to destabilize, its light flickering as the TDD disrupted its energy. Elena worked quickly, her fingers flying across the device's interface. But the strain was evident. The TDD's core was reaching its breaking point. "We're running out of time," Jonas shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Elena nodded, her focus unwavering. "Almost there," she said. The core's energy reached a critical threshold, its light intensifying until it was blinding. Elena slammed her hand down on the TDD, triggering the final sequence. The chamber was engulfed in a wave of light and sound as the core collapsed, its energy cascading through the nexus. The shockwave sent Elena and her team tumbling, the world around them dissolving into chaos. She felt herself being pulled into the temporal maelstrom, the TDD's energy entwining with the core's as time itself fractured. And then, there was silence. When Elena opened her eyes, she found herself lying on the ground, the TDD clutched in her hand. The nexus was gone, its structure reduced to nothing but debris floating in the void. Around her, the resistance fighters began to stir, their expressions a mix of confusion and relief. "Did we do it?" Jonas asked, his voice hoarse. Elena checked the TDD, its interface flickering before stabilizing. The timeline, humanity's timeline, was intact. The Zarene's temporal manipulations had been undone. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with quiet triumph. The victory was not without its cost. The resistance had lost many of their own, and the scars of the war would remain for generations. But they had proven that humanity was not a species to be erased. They had fought back against impossible odds and emerged victorious. As the survivors regrouped, Elena looked out at the stars, a sense of hope blooming in her chest. The fight was not over. There would always be new challenges, new threats to face. But for the first time, humanity's future felt like something worth fighting for. Because the Zarene didn't understand time travel, and they didn't understand humanity. But now they would never forget. In the weeks following the destruction of the temporal nexus, the galaxy began to shift. The Zarene's hold over time was broken, their forces scattered and disoriented. Worlds that had been trapped in the loops of their manipulations began to recover, their histories restored and their futures their own once more. On Earth, the resistance turned its focus to rebuilding. The ruins of cities became the foundation for new communities, their people united by the shared experience of survival. The scars of war were everywhere, but so too were the signs of renewal. Elena found herself at the center of this new era, her role as both a scientist and a symbol of hope making her a natural leader. She worked tirelessly to share the knowledge she had gained, helping humanity rebuild not just its cities, but its sense of purpose. One day, as she walked through the bustling streets of New Dawn, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The faces of those she had lost, those who had fought alongside her, were etched into her memory. Their sacrifices had paved the way for this moment. Jonas joined her, his presence a steadying force. "It's hard to believe we're here," he said, his voice filled with a mix of pride and exhaustion. Elena nodded, her gaze distant. "We still have a long way to go," she said. "But for the first time, I feel like we have a chance." Jonas smiled, his expression softening. "That's because of you," he said. "You gave us something to fight for." Elena shook her head. "It wasn't just me," she said. "It was all of us. Humanity came together in a way I never thought possible. That's what saved us." The days turned into months, and the resistance evolved into a coalition of leaders and thinkers dedicated to ensuring the mistakes of the past were not repeated. They established councils to govern the rebuilding efforts, bringing together representatives from every corner of the planet. The TDD, now deactivated and encased in a protective chamber, became a relic of the war, a reminder of the lengths humanity had gone to in order to survive. Scientists studied its design, hoping to learn from its technology while ensuring that it could never again be used to manipulate time. As humanity rebuilt, messages began to arrive from other worlds, civilizations that had been freed from the Zarene's control. They expressed their gratitude and solidarity, offering alliances and sharing knowledge. For the first time, humanity was not alone in the galaxy. Elena traveled to these worlds, her presence a symbol of hope and unity. She shared stories of Earth's struggle, of the Resistance's victories and sacrifices. In return, she learned about the challenges and triumphs of other species, their perspectives enriching her understanding of what it meant to be part of a greater whole. On one such journey, she stood before a gathering of leaders from across the galaxy. The room was filled with beings of all shapes and sizes, their voices a harmonious cacophony of languages and ideas. "We have faced darkness," Elena said, her voice carrying above the crowd. "But we have also seen the strength that comes from unity. Together, we can create a future where no one lives in fear, where every voice is heard, and where hope shines brighter than any shadow." Her words were met with applause, a chorus of voices affirming their commitment to a shared vision. And as Elena looked around the room, she felt a spark of hope that had once seemed impossible. Because the Zarene hadn't just underestimated humanity's ability to fight, they had underestimated its capacity to inspire, to endure, and to rebuild. And as long as there were stars in the sky, humanity's light would continue to shine. The galaxy was forever changed, not by the might of its weapons or the power of its armies, but by the unyielding spirit of those who refused to be erased. And as Elena stepped out into the sunlight, the sound of laughter and life filling the air, she knew that the story of humanity was far from over. It was just the beginning. In the decades that followed the war with the Zarene, humanity transformed. The trauma of the invasion lingered, but it was tempered by the resilience and unity that had emerged from the ashes. The ruins of old cities became the foundation for thriving metropolises, their architecture a blend of human ingenuity and the technologies shared by their new galactic allies. Elena's role in the rebuilding efforts grew to a near-mythic status. She became a symbol not just of survival, but of humanity's ability to adapt and thrive in the face of insurmountable odds. But for Elena, the accolades were a reminder of the sacrifices that had made their victories possible. The faces of her fallen fallen comrades haunted her dreams, their memories a constant presence in her mind. One evening, as she stood on a balcony overlooking new dawn, Jonas joined her, a quiet strength in his presence. "You've done it," he said, his voice carrying a note of admiration. "Look at what you've helped build." Elena smiled faintly, her gaze distant. "We did it," she corrected. "All of us. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." Jonas chuckled. "If that's what you want to call it," he said. "But you know they'll never see it that way. To them, you're the one who saved us." Elena shook her head. "I didn't save anyone," she said. "I just gave people a reason to believe in themselves. That's what really made the difference." The years that followed were marked by milestones that once seemed impossible. Earth joined a coalition of liberated worlds, their united efforts creating a network of trade, knowledge, and mutual defense. Together, they established a council to mediate disputes and ensure that no species would ever again face the kind of tyranny the Zerine had imposed. The TDD, now preserved in a museum dedicated to the war, became a symbol of both humanity's ingenuity and the dangers of unchecked power. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see it, their reflections visible in its polished surface. To many, it was a reminder of the fragility of time and the strength of those who had fought to protect it. Elena retired from public life in her later years, choosing to spend her time mentoring the next generation of leaders and scientists. She shared her knowledge freely, ensuring that the lessons of the past would not be forgotten. But even in retirement, her influence was felt. The principles she had championed, unity, resilience, and hope, continued to shape humanity's path. On the anniversary of the Nexus's destruction, a ceremony was held in New Dawn's central plaza. Elena, now in her 70s, watched from the sidelines as Jonas, now a respected counselor, delivered a speech to the gathered crowd. "We stand here today because of the sacrifices of those who came before us," he said, his voice carrying across the plaza. "They fought not just for survival, but for the future we now live in. And it is our responsibility to honor their memory by continuing to build a world where hope triumphs over fear." The crowd erupted in applause, their faces filled with pride and determination. Elena felt a swell of emotion as she looked around, her heart full at the sight of the world they had built together. As the ceremony concluded, a young girl approached her, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you Dr. Elena Vargas?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Elena smiled, her wrinkles deepening with the expression. "I am," she said. The girl hesitated, then held out a small notebook. "Can I have your autograph?" she asked. "I want to be a scientist just like you." Elena took the notebook, her hands steady despite her age. She signed her name with a flourish, then handed it back to the girl. "You're going to be a great scientist," she said, "and you're going to change the world." The girl beamed, clutching the notebook to her chest. "Thank you," she said before running off to join her parents. Elena watched her go, a sense of peace settling over her. The war with the Zerine was long over, but its lessons continued to shape the galaxy. Humanity had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their light shining brighter than ever. And as Elena looked up at the stars, she knew that their story was far from over. The future stretched out before them, a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of hope and possibility. Because the Zerine didn't understand time travel, but humanity had shown them something even more powerful, the strength of unity and the resilience of the human spirit. Decades after the Zerine invasion had been thwarted, the galaxy stood as a testament to what could be achieved when species united under a shared vision. The Coalition of Free Worlds, as it was now called, spanned hundreds of systems, each contributing to a tapestry of cultures, knowledge, and mutual defense. Humanity, once isolated and fractured, had become a cornerstone of this new era. Their resilience and ingenuity were celebrated across the stars, their struggles and victories immortalized in songs, stories, and art. For the first time in its history, Earth was not just a planet, it was a symbol of hope. Elena Vargas's legacy continued to inspire. Her work, meticulously preserved in archives and museums, became the foundation for new generations of scientists and leaders. The temporal displacement device, once a tool of desperation, now served as a reminder of the fragile balance of time and the power of unity. But even in this new age of peace, the lessons of the past were never forgotten. Every year, on the anniversary of the Nexus's destruction, the Coalition held a day of remembrance. Representatives from every member world gathered to honor those who had sacrificed everything to secure their freedom. At one such gathering, held in the heart of New Dawn's Unity Plaza, Jonas delivered the keynote address. Now in his 80s, his voice carried the weight of experience and wisdom. "We remember not just the battles we fought, but the reasons we fought them," he said. "We remember the lives that were lost and the lives that were saved. We remember that our greatest strength lies not in our weapons, but in our ability to stand together as one." The crowd erupted in in applause, their voices a harmonious blend of languages and dialects. Among them stood Elena, now retired but still a revered figure. She watched with a quiet pride, her heart swelling at the sight of the unity they had fought so hard to achieve. As the ceremony continued, a young scientist approached her, his expression nervous but determined. "Dr. Vargas," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "it's an honor to meet you. I've been studying your work on temporal mechanics. It's what inspired me to join the Coalition's research division." Elena smiled, her eyes twinkling with warmth. "The honor is mine," she said. "The future belongs to you now. Make it count." The young man nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I will," he said before rejoining the crowd. As the day turned to night, Elena found herself drawn to the edge of the plaza, where a memorial had been erected in honor of the fallen. The names of every resistance fighter, every civilian who had perished, were etched into its surface, illuminated by a soft, ethereal glow. She traced her fingers over the names, her thoughts drifting to the past, to the friends she had lost, to the battles they had fought, and to the moments of hope that had carried them through the darkness. Jonas joined her, his presence as steady as ever. "They'd be proud of what we've built," he said, his voice quiet. Elena nodded, her gaze fixed on the memorial. "We couldn't have done it without them," she said. "They gave everything so we could have this future." Jonas placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm. "And you made sure their sacrifices weren't in vain," he said. "That's a legacy worth remembering." The two stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their memories balanced by the hope of what lay ahead. As the stars began to fill the sky, Elena turned to Jonas, a small smile playing on her lips. "Do you think they ever expected this?" she asked. Jonas chuckled. "The Zareen? Not a chance," he said. "They didn't understand what humanity was capable of. They didn't understand that unity was our greatest strength." Elena's smile grew, her eyes reflecting the light of the memorial. "Then let's make sure they never forget," she said. And as the night deepened, the galaxy continued to turn, its stars a reminder of the infinite possibilities that awaited those who dared to dream. Humanity had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their light shining brighter than ever. Because the Zareen hadn't just underestimated humanity's ability to survive, they had underestimated its ability to inspire, to endure, and to thrive. And in the vast expanse of the cosmos, that light would continue to shine, a beacon for all who sought hope in the face of adversity. In the centuries that followed, humanity's story became a legend told across the stars. The coalition of free worlds grew beyond even the most optimistic predictions, encompassing thousands of systems and countless species. Together, they forged an era of unprecedented peace and collaboration, their shared history a testament to the power of unity. The temporal displacement device, once a tool of desperation, became a symbol of hope and resilience. Preserved in a galactic museum, it drew visitors from every corner of the coalition. Scholars and students alike marveled at its design, its polished surface reflecting the faces of those who had come to learn its story. Elena's name was immortalized in the annals of history, her contributions celebrated in songs, books, and holographic dramas. But for those who knew her best, her true legacy was not in the accolades or the monuments. It was in the lives she had touched, the futures she had helped shape. One such legacy was a young girl named Elira, a descendant of one of the resistance fighters who had stood beside Elena in the final battle. Inspired by the stories of her ancestors, Elira dedicated her life to exploring the mysteries of time and space. Her discoveries pushed the boundaries of science, opening new frontiers for the Coalition. On the anniversary of the Coalition's founding, a grand celebration was held on Unity Prime, the capital world that had been built as a symbol of interstellar cooperation. Representatives from every member species gathered to honor the occasion, their voices a harmonious chorus that echoed through the vast halls of the Unity Pavilion. Elira stood among them, her heart swelling with pride as she listened to the keynote address delivered by the Coalition's current leader, a descendant of Jonas, whose legacy as a leader and statesman had inspired generations. "We stand here today not just as representatives of our worlds, but as stewards of a vision," the leader said, their voice resonating with conviction. "A vision of a galaxy where unity and understanding are our guiding principles. A vision made possible by those who dared to stand against the darkness and fight for the light." The crowd erupted in applause, their unity a living testament to the ideals they celebrated. Elira found herself looking toward the stars, her thoughts drifting to the past, to the stories of courage and sacrifice sacrifice that had brought them to this moment. And as she gazed at the heavens, she felt a profound sense of connection to those who had come before her. To Elena, whose determination had turned the tide of history. To Jonas, whose leadership had inspired a fractured humanity to unite. And to every unnamed individual whose sacrifices had laid the foundation for the world she now called home. The celebration continued late into the night, the stars above serving as a reminder of the infinite possibilities that awaited those who dared to dream. And as the lights of Unity Prime shimmered like a beacon in the void, the galaxy turned, its future a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of hope and possibility. Because the Zareen hadn't just underestimated humanity's ability to survive, they had underestimated its ability to create, to inspire, and to endure. And as long as there were stars in the sky, humanity's light would continue to shine, a beacon for all who sought hope in the face of adversity. The story of humanity was far from over. It was a story of resilience, of unity, and of the enduring belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always a path toward the light. And as the galaxy looked to the future, it did so with the knowledge that its greatest strength lay in its ability to stand together as one.